Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Ren's room, my room. Hope you're well. Hope you're looking forward to Christmas. If indeed you celebrate Christmas. Today we're going to talk about a simple little way that you can really please an INFJ. If indeed pleasing an INFJ, getting on an INFJ's good side is something that you would very much like to do. Before I move on, it's Christmas time. Why don't you get my book, The Ecstatic Soul? It's less than $10, and it's a reference book on the INFJ. Links are below. You can also get my novel, The Infinite Castle. Came out last year. Rumor has it the main character's an INFJ. Get my book. You like fiction, you like existentialism, modernism, magical realism, and you support my work. You can also support me on Patreon, by the way. Link is below. Really helps the channel. Thank you so much to my supporters. The INFJ, very often seen in the light of being a bit of a mystical, rare entity that people sometimes fantasize about. Not necessarily sexually fantasize, mind you, but conceptually fantasize. In such a way that ultimately when they're facing an INFJ, they sometimes don't really know how to get across to them, get on their good side, essentially get on with them, leave the INFJ with a positive impression of them, okay? And they might be self-conscious about it, which usually doesn't help creating a connection. The INFJ is often hard to read, which also doesn't help. INFJs are quite private, so that, again, doesn't help sort of gauging how the relationship is progressing, even if it's in the course of a conversation. And one of the essential sort of takeaways I want you to get from this video, if you're not an INFJ, is that it's actually often by overcomplicating things that you don't get the desired result. You don't get the result that you would like to obtain, namely getting to a stage where you can actually become friends with an INFJ. Because INFJs are going to value things that they would consider essential in a friend, someone they trust and someone that they want to see more of. Expectations that they will not necessarily verbalize to themselves, but will intuit, as an organic growth of the conversational dynamic. And really, from observing, because when you're an INFJ, you spend a lot of time observing. One of the simplest ways, but probably elusive ways that you can please an INFJ, that you can make an INFJ happy that they're interacting with you, is by listening to them. Sounds very simple. But clearly, it is not as simple as it sounds, otherwise it would happen more often. Because you could phrase the question, or phrase the answer rather, differently, reversely, so to speak. You could say, well, how to get on an INFJ's bad side is to not listen to them. And that happens a lot. It happens a lot. Now, there's people who spend lots of time interacting with others with an implicit pre-understanding of what these others expect, and their mode of interaction is on that basis rather than on what these others actually expect. It's usually the case, it's always the case, that you develop an understanding of what someone else really expect, if you listen to them, if you ask them. The more you are under the influence of previous knowledge, or quote-unquote knowledge you thought you gathered through various sources, online sources and so on, the more you're going to think that you have this pre-understanding and you don't need to consult the person. Since there is so much literature about the INFJ, so much mythology about the INFJ, you're probably going to be even more likely to just operate with this pre-understanding. And your self-consciousness will probably make you a little bit uncomfortable, and that will only worsen the process, because you have no idea how often it can be frustrating for an INFJ not to be properly listened to. Now, mind you, it doesn't mean necessarily that the other person is just constantly blabbering away and you just have no room whatsoever as an INFJ to say anything. Yeah, that happens to a lot of introverts, but it does happen, and that is of course very annoying, but it's not just going to be annoying to an INFJ. The thing about an INFJ, and I don't know exactly what it is about us, you could theorize lots of things about this, but it just so happens that apparently we just have the vibe, the automatic vibe of a really good listener. People just speak, and we enjoy listening. People trust us to listen. It just happens. It's something in the air. It's something that just happens. Not just because it turns out that we're happy to let them speak, but people feel like we're really listening, and when we're interjecting comments, they're relevant. They show that we have an in-depth understanding as far as it can be attained of their situation. So it obviously encourages people to speak more because they see with such great listeners, they don't necessarily encounter a lot of great listeners across their life or daily existence because they're not that common. And so they indulge that, and in some sense you can understand it, but it can slip into just not really listening to the INFJ, except when it suits you, that is to get some feedback on what you've just been saying to them. And it turns out actually the INFJ often will let you appreciate that they would actually like to sort of speak their minds about their own stuff. And if you do not give them that space, and the INFJ will not necessarily ask you for 50-50, because INFJs like to listen, they like to observe. So, a 40-60 situation or even a 35-65 is likely to suit them, but do not give them a 5-95 or a 10-90. Do let them speak and do listen. Okay, don't just go like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 you listen and then you sort of move on. Listen and engage, because INFJs do need that. And INFJs are mini introverted ENFJs. That is to say that they need to be able to express things that are well articulated and well interacted with, also via the medium of FE, by the other person. If you're neglecting that, if you're not appreciating that, if you're not valuing that, that will frustrate the INFJ. They'll often not necessarily manifest it, because again, being introverts, they'll introvert their frustration. Though they'll make you feel it by not necessarily seeking your company in the future. Taking the time to listen, to resist the urge to always be talking because you feel like you're in the company of a great listener. Having a great listener as a companion does not mean that the other person doesn't want to also speak and be listened to. It's a simple little bit of advice, but it's hugely useful, trust me about it. The people that are closest to me in my life is people who are capable of listening. People who are not capable of listening are sometimes people who think that I'm very valuable to them, that I'm a great friend to them, and occasionally are frustrated or disappointed that I don't seek their company as often as they would like to seek mine. That is the reason, and that is going to be the reason for a lot of INFJs. So please keep this in mind. It's simple in concept, probably harder in practice, but always have a little voice at the back of your mind that reminds you, ask them questions, let them speak, even if they don't impose themselves in terms of, wanting to proactively speak. Give them that space. And you'll see that you'll value very much what they have to say on their own side. Okay, so let me know in the comments what you think, and INFJs, let me know if you agree with this and if you've experienced these things. So in the comments, and don't forget about my Patreon page. See you guys.